Hello guys, welcome to my SQL series on LearnIn. My name is Nse. Today we are going to talk about CRUD. CRUD is an acronym representing these four words: C for create, R for read, U for update, and D for delete. We can say that CRUD is a set of basic operations commonly used in database management systems such as MySQL, which is what we are currently working with in this series. These basic operations are the create operation, the read operation, the update operation, and delete operation. Create is basically adding new data to a table in a database. The insert into statement is used. I'm going to define all four words, and after which we will see examples of how these operations can be done. Then we have the read operation. Read is the operation of retrieving or fetching data from a table in a database. The select statement is used for this. Update. The update operation modifies existing data in a database table. For this, update statement is used. And lastly, we have delete. Delete operation is going to remove data from a database. For this, the delete statement is used. Now, let us talk about these operations in detail, one after the other. For this, we will use the command line client. In the command line client, I'm going to enter my password. And the first thing I want to do is see the databases that I currently have available. So I am going to show databases. So I have bookstore database and all these other databases. So I'm going to use the bookstore database. I'll simply say use book_store. Database has changed. So to be sure that I'm actually using the bookstore database, I'll type the command select database with the parenthesis, semicolon, hit enter. So here it's been confirmed I'm using the bookstore database. To go ahead with CRUD, first let's create a table. So I already have the query typed using my SQL workbench. Remember that my SQL command line client and my SQL workbench do the same thing. They serve the same purpose. Only that my SQL workbench is a graphical user interface, which kind of makes it more interesting to use. That being said, I'm going to create this table using my SQL workbench. Here is the query typed. So I'll click on this cursor that is going to execute everything that I have in this file. So we do not have an error. Let's now come back to command line client and let's describe employees because the table has been created. So we have our employees table. Remember from what we learned in the previous lesson, we have a primary key set on the ID column and we have auto increment on it. So this means that MySQL will generate ID for us starting from 1 and it will auto increment it based on the number of rows that will be created in this table. Just to show us, we have create table, table name is employees, then we have ID column, and we have data type of int, we have primary key on it, and we have auto increment on it. That's just it. And then we have first name set to data type of varchar, max limit of 50. We have last name set to data type of varchar, max limit of 50. And then we have age set to data type of int. Now that we have a table created, let's now see what create operation entails. Remember that create operation is that operation that will add new data to a table in a database, and we do that using insert into statement. If you have been following the series, you would agree with me that we have used the insert into statement over and over again. Nonetheless, I'm still going to show how to work with the insert into statement using this employees table. So let's use the insert into statement and let's insert data into the employees table. Don't forget the syntax: insert into, then the name of the table, which in this case is employees, and we are specifying the columns to insert into: first name, last name, and age. Though we have an ID column here, we do not have to bother about the ID column because it is the primary key column and it has been set to auto increment. So MySQL is going to generate this ID for us. All right, so that being said, I'll select this body of code that I want to run, and I'm going to click on this icon that says execute the selected portion of the script. So I'll click on it and we do not have an error. So we have been able to successfully insert into employees. I want to use both MySQL Workbench and command line today, just so that we can see that they do the exact same thing. So if we were to type this insert statement on the command line client and there are no syntax errors, we would have this data inserted into the employees table, just like Workbench has done for us. Actually, this is all about the create operation inserting into a table. So let's now proceed to reading from our table, which is the employees table. Remember that read is going to help us to fetch data from a table in a database. So in this case, our table is this employees table, and I'll show us again. Read uses the select statement. Most of us are already familiar with select star statement. So we are going to select star from employees, which is our table, and we will hit enter. Now notice that we have all the data currently available in the employees table. That's all the data that we entered here, in say as first name on row 1, Sam as last name, Jeff as first name on row 2, Smith as the last name, Michael as first name on third row, Cliff as the last name. So we have the values entered into this table exactly the way that we specified here. We have first name, last name, and age entered just like we have on this table, to the last value, which is Maria for first name, Smith for last name, and 35 for age. Now notice that we have ID generated for us automatically. and that's because the ID column is the primary key column and it's been set to auto increment. This is us selecting all the data in our table, which is the employees table. However, in reading from a table, it is possible to target a specific column. So when you want to select only one column from a table, you're going to have the select keyword, and then you specify the column that you want to read from, and then you specify the table name. Here on the command line client, let's say that we want to see only the ages of the different employees. All we have to do is type select. The column name in this case is age. We would say age from employees. We hit enter. Now notice that the only data shown to us is the data on the age column, and this would work with any of the columns at all that you want. If we wanted to see data from just the ID column, then we would have ID there and hit enter, and we have only the ID column shown to us. If we wanted to see only the first name, we would have select first name from employees. Let's hit enter, and we have only the first name column shown to us. Now, in targeting the columns, you can decide to select more than one column. If you want to read from more than one column, you would have the select keyword, and then you specify the columns that you want to read from, 1, 2, and any number of columns at all that you want to read from, and then you have from and the table name. This is the syntax. Let's go to command line client and put this to use. So let's say that we want ID and last name. Let's use last name in this case. So we are going to simply type select ID. That's one of the columns that we want, comma, last name from employees. For now, we want just these two columns, the ID column and the last name column. Remember that our table has 1, 2, 3, 4 columns: the ID column, first name column, last name column, and the age column. So in this query, we are only trying to read the data in two columns, ID column and last name column. Now let's hit enter. So notice that we have shown to us here the two columns that we specified, the ID column and the last name column. We could decide that we want ID column, last name and age, so we'll just separate the columns with commas like this. The ID column is separated with a comma, the last name column is separated with a comma, and then we have age, which is the last column. On this select statement, here you don't need to bother with a comma anymore. Now let's hit enter to execute, and we have ID, last name and age displayed. Now it is also possible to read data based on a value. If we want to read data based on a value, then we are going to have the syntax written like this: select star from table name, table is wrong here, and I apologize, from table name, and then we will introduce the where clause. We will specify the column name and we set the value that we are specifically targeting. So here on command line client, let's see how that works. Let's say select star from employees, where let's use the age column, and let's set the value to 35. Let's say where age is 35. Let's execute the query. Now notice that we have all the columns displayed: the ID column, the first name column, last name column, and the age column. However, it is only the rows, remember that rows are from left to right. It is only the rows that contain age 35 that are shown to us here. We have 35 on row number 2. Smith has age of 35. We also have 35 on row number 6. Smith again has age of 35. That's kind of confusing in a way. Let's scroll up to the original table. So here on this table, we can see that on row number 2, we have Jeff Smith. Jeff as first name, Smith as last name, and the age is 35. We have on row number 6, Maria as first name and Smith as last name, and the age is 35. So that is why we have just these two rows shown to us, 2 and 6. We could decide to target based on first name. In this case, we would have select star from employees where first name, now that's the first name column, has the value of Nse. This time we are using quotes because Nse is a string. Now let's execute this query. Notice that the only data sets shown to us are the data sets that contain Nse as first name. I hope that you get the point. So sometimes you can decide to replace the column name or give it an alias. Let's say that we want to target the last name column. So we would say select last name, and then we would use as, just like this in the syntax, we would say select last name as, let's just call it name, and let's have from and specify the table name. So what this is saying to MySQL is select last name, only the last name from the employees table. Now, when you come back with the table that contains the last name, replace last name with name. Let's run this query and see what happens. So now notice that we have this table that shows only the last names that we have in our employees table. The last names are Sam, Smith, Cliff, Jeff, Joe, and Smith again. And if we come back here to the output of running this command, you're going to see that we have all the last names listed. However, the column heading has changed from last name to name because we have asked that last name should now be represented as name. I hope that you get the point. So that's all for reading. Let's now go to update. Remember that the update operation is going to modify existing data in a database table. We are still working with the employees table. To update existing data, we use the update statement. So now let's see how that works. Let's have update. The syntax is that you would have updates and then you specify the table name, which in our case is employees. And then we want to set any row at all on this table to a different value. So let's use first name, and we want first name to be set to enter first name. Let's not forget the semicolon. Now let's hit enter. So we have that 6 rows have been affected. Our table has 6 rows, so all the rows in this table have been affected by this change. Now let's select star from employees. Notice that all the values that we had in the first name column have been replaced with enter first name. So all the first names are now enter first name. Now, where we do not want all the values in a column to be affected, we can target a specific value. The way to do this is by introducing the where clause in the update statement. So we are going to have our query looking like this: update employees. Employees is the table name. So whatever table it is you're working with, you use the name in this case. And then we have set. Set is a keyword too, is from MySQL. So we are going to say update employees, set first name to enter first name, just like we had here in the first update where we were not targeting any values. But because we are trying to target specific values now in the first name column, we now have the where clause introduced, and here we have where written just like this. And then we are telling MySQL in first name column, wherever you find nse, replace it, update it to enter first name. Let's execute this query and see what happens. Now we have 0 rows affected. That is because in our current table, there is no value that has nse as first name. And that's because at the point of running this update query, we changed all the first name to enter first name. So we no longer have nse in the first name column. So though the query ran successfully without any errors, no row was affected. Now let's run this query using the update statement. This time we are targeting the last name column. So we have update employees, set last name to enter last name, where, sorry, this should be last name, not first name, where last name is equal to Smith. So what will happen is MySQL will check through this last name column. At every point where there is Smith, it is going to replace it. MySQL will replace it with enter last name. Let's execute this query and see what happens. So we have query OK, 2 rows affected. And if we look in the employees table, you're going to see that it is only 2 rows that have last name of Smith, row 2 and row 6. Now let's select star from employees. So notice here now that in the table, we have been able to update last name value from Smith to enter last name. So that's basically how to carry out the update operation. Now let's talk about the delete operation. The delete operation is going to remove data from a database table. And to carry out delete operation, use delete statement. So we are going to come here and we are going to say delete from our table name employees. This time let's use age. Let's say where age is equal to 28. Let's have the semicolon, and before I execute this query, this is the syntax to use. You have delete from, and then you specify the table name, and then you have the where clause, and you specify the column where you want to delete from, and then you specify the value that you want to be deleted. So in this case, MySQL is going to check through the age column. Wherever there is 28, then that row will be deleted. So currently we have 28 on row 3. Let's execute this query and see what happens. So query is okay, 1 row is affected. Let's select star from employees. Now, if we check this employees table, you are going to see that row 3 is gone, and it's row 3 that had 28 as age value. I hope that that's clear. Now, let's say we wanted to delete Sam from the last name column. We will have delete from, and then we'll specify our table name, which is employees, and then we will say where last name is equal to Sam. Let's run this query. So it's okay, one row is affected and it's only one row that has the last name of Sam, and that is row 1. Let's select star from employees. Now notice that row 1 has been deleted. So while working with the delete statement, you mostly want to use the where clause, unless of course you're trying to delete all the data from the table, in which case you would just only have delete from employees semicolon. Now let's execute this code. So notice that we have 4 rows affected. That's the remaining 4 rows that we had at the end of performing the deletion, the first 2 delete operations. So if we try to select star from employees, we have an empty set. That means that we currently do not have any data in this table, and that is because we executed this delete query here, asking that all the data from the employees table should be deleted. Now notice, however, that deleting from a table is different from dropping a table. Now this delete statement is only going to delete all the data from the table, not the table itself. That is why we can describe employees and still have a table returned to us. Our table still exists the exact same way that we made it, with all the 4 columns: ID, first name, last name, and age. If we go up, I just want to show us the first point where we described my employees table. We had 4 columns: ID, first name, last name, and age. Exactly like this. We had the null column key. We had, like, at the point where we described the employees table at first, what we had here is exactly what we have here after executing this delete statement. Now let's say drop employees. We have an error because I omitted table. So to drop, we would have drop table, and the table name is employees. Now let's execute this query. Query is okay. Now let's describe employees table. Notice now that we have an error, and in this error we are being told that bookstore.employees doesn't exist. This means that inside the bookstore database, remember bookstore is the database that we are using currently, employees table does not exist. That is because we dropped the table the moment that we executed this drop table query here. I hope that you get the point. This is the much that we are going to take today. If you have any questions or comments, please say them in the comment section. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Learn In. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.